Your boy finally saw The Batman last week. Finally. That and so much more. Next up on Just the Talk. So let's get right to the talk. And welcome to the Flicks Picks and the Nitpicks. And I am your humble host, 0718. And your boy finally seen it. Sat down, finally watched The Batman. Long time in coming, but it needed to be done. And I'm actually happy to say I finally sat down and got to it. So, by today, by the time you listen to this, my fresh out the theater response should be already up and out there. And hopefully, the review should be out later on. That's the aim. Because we're going to have more reviews coming back on the channel more often than not. So please focus on the channel. The Just the Talks are consistent enough that we can finally start dropping that. And then we can get back to doing shows. And we can get back to all the fun stuff. But Just the Talk, I'm really having a ball doing it. And it's cool and it's easier for me to engage with you. So if you've been paying attention to the channel, you know I've been waiting to see this movie for a minute. Always trying to, and if ain't one thing, it was another. And I finally got to it. And I don't want to spoil everything without my review, but I do want to do a lot more discussion around it. I gave you, if you're here, you already know my fresh out response. Finally got to see it, and I'm really glad to see it. I really liked it. This is the type of film that I would make. So the conversation now is, let's talk about what's going on with it from the Snyderverse aspect, from the box office. I really want to talk about the film, but I don't want to get into my review too much because I got to get back to reviews. But I'm glad to have finally seen it. So the question is how do we make this one entertaining and fun? How do we still talk about the movie without talking about the movie? Easy. Just to get it off the table, Snyderverse stuff. You know my channel. I'm 10 toes deep in the Snyderverse, but and Snyder fandom, but I'm not really all wrapped up into it like other fans are. I try to remove Snyder's name as much as I can in terms of talking about the film because I just like good films. And that's what made me like him. I think he's a great filmmaker. I do feel like in trying to make a cohesive universe, they've overly interfered and forced him to keep having to try and change and left small things that were overly complicated when you're trying to really hit a high point with one story, but then I have to create another story to get us to the story that the studio wants me to. Now all of a sudden when my first way of doing it had to get removed and had to construct a big thing. In other words, they were going to slow stroll it one movie at a time. After Man of Steel, and they was about to go to do Man of Steel 2, and the idea obviously was to get to Justice League. But as soon as he mentioned Batman, they was like, you know what, let's get us to the Justice League. I want you to get to Justice League. So his team had to say, all right, well, this is how we're going to have to build that out. To build a universe out of this. And then when they try to design that with the ideas that you have from layovers in mind, and when you're trying to do it and push it out, and then you have a rival, well, it's not like Marvel enough, so we have to punch in and do things to rival Marvel. We want more Batman in this movie, so I gotta cut stuff out of BVS to make it more about Batman. I want more Batman into it, so I have to write stuff to make Batman have a reason to be in this film while also trying to tell our Superman's story. Because we really started Superman from a very genesis, from day one on the job. And instead of like capitalizing on the moments that the last film presented, this overarching idea of, well, we need new strategic plans so we could always catch up to Marvel, or make people feel like they want to see Marvel movies because Marvel has always been in the orbit up to that time. That being said now, because this has been overly talked about so much, we cannot get a full story focused in one kind of way without having to redirect for other ideas and story plot points. It wasn't a bad, and to me, even the execution wasn't per se so bad. I think the most muddled part of the storytelling was, at least in BVS, was all that Lex Luthor tried to do to frame Superman. I think that was a little too muddled, trying to weave everybody to be where they needed to be in this specific time to do what they needed to do. Me personally, I think they could have killed two birds with one stone by just saying, you know what? If he figured out who Lois Lane was, all you needed to do was put Lois Lane there. Maybe add one last little thing from Lex Luthor to show that it was evil intent. But most importantly, you wanted Superman to get there to stop and interfere with the bombs, which he kind of did. But I would have stayed there with it. The other stuff with charring up people and stuff like that, you know what? That I get what they were trying to do to add on to it and make them look more murderous. I think that's where they less needed it, because the inside joke to everyone is Lois Lane. We all know who Lois is to him. To everyone just now seeing it, it would have been why would he would have done all of that to get us to BVS. All you needed was him interfering with a war and put her someplace where she was investigating something and Superman had to interfere, and basically, let's say in saving her, he let somehow a villain managed to get away and he did something else elsewhere, and we'd have to argue if he didn't interfere there. And let's say he intervened there and saved lives there, but then more other lives got lost there, and that should have been the cusp of the movie, which I would have called it Man of Steel, I would call it Man of Steel BVS, or BVS Man of or I would have called it BVS Man of Steel 2, because it would have built up to the end point where Batman would have had to get involved, and end it where Superman defeats Batman. We might even make it look like he died, but he didn't die, he lived. And Batman gets up and like, oh word? Alright, now you done really pissed me off. Then he comes back and he really goes hard with the weapons and the planning and the training and all that, and create another villain that along the way that he'll have to deal with while coming back to get Superman. And that film will be focused on Clark doing his best to expose Batman as a vigilante being worse. And that would raise the question, is Batman and Superman just not two sides of the same coin? And they're both should not interfere. One is interfering in local businesses issues, which is not as much of an issue because he's local, but Superman across the board. And then that should have been the argument between the two, so it could be a more laser focus on the highbrow concepts as opposed to needing to do so much and also bring in Doomsday. I wouldn't have brought Doomsday in so soon. Again, I would have made the first part of BVS about that. Superman from the very beginning being a darling and everyone looking at him a certain kind of way until we get to this point in probably, like, let's say if it's 4 quarters of the film, by the 3rd quarter, that's where Superman interferes and falls into Lex Luthor's plan, saves Lois, and it creates then it superstarts the idea of that would have been the thing where I would have had the senator say, see, I told you. Had the senator starting it from the very beginning, arguing while Superman is being a good guy, and then this happens. A big thing happens, he goes saves Lois, but because he's so concerned with Lois, he interfered in international business, and things spiraled out after that, and we had to go to war behind that. Now the question is what do Superman do? And then that brings Batman. He catches an L by the end of the film, and then we go into the BVS 2, and that's really where we get into it now. The fight, everything. I utilized the two movies to bounce back and forth against two concepts of vigilantism from two angles. And that's how I would have addressed it. But I'm going way off. I'm going way off back into Snyderville because, it's so easy to get there. I think where the Batman shined at its most was it did not have to deal with other characters that are hard to visually depict standing in a realistically next to Superman on an equal plane. Next to Batman on equal playing field when all of them have powers. That would have been a real hard thing to execute. Then you get a chance to really deal with Batman as a masterful detective trying to figure out what's going on. And even though he wasn't the most masterful in this rendition of him, it shows that he is thinking, he's smart, already well equipped. It's more of a detective film, if you will, and him figuring out how to get from point A to point B. A better depiction of it. But it wasn't so much lost in figuring out who was who and what was what. It was trying to figure out who the riddles, and that is the Riddler. So again, this was very well thought out. Even the voiceovers to bring you a more contemporary noir type film. Excellent. There were just so many different angles that you was able to really tell the story from and execute in a proper manner to present a fully realized Batman, and in a way that we've never got a chance to experience him outside of the comics, which I thought was a beautiful way of presenting. Matt Reeves did well with that. Now, with the success of the Batman, and we could argue will it get to $1 billion, because I don't think he'll make it to $1 billion personally. It's possible, and I'm not arguing the 40-day weekend thing. It's not that. I think that this film, it's not that it overperformed. I think it performed very well. Does a pandemic affect it? To a minor degree, because of habits have changed for a lot of people, but at the same time, for spectacle films, people are willing to come out. Remember, Spider-Man is still out here killing it, and it made it to $1 billion, but we gotta be fair, it's coming up off of a well-oiled machine and a backlog history of films, not just up to, but including the last two of its own personal series of films, the first two Spider-Mans. So we can see this type of success. It's available for the grabbing. Where I will say that it won't is because the type of film it is. It's closer to the Joker, and that did $1 billion. I give you that. And it's possible, get it. I won't say it would never, like I'm real defiant. If it does, it'll slow stroll it. I don't think it will, because I don't know if it's that kind of rewatchable for a general audience. It's not that kind of rewatchable for a general audience. We could argue the same thing with the Joker, but the Joker felt more like it could have been its own movie. It felt a little bit more like it could have been its own movie because there was no Batman. And that's another thing. Make no mistake, the Joker 2 will not make $1 billion. I don't think it will. Right now, I mean, until we see a trailer, we get an idea of the story. I don't see it making $1 billion. I see it being successful. I just don't see it being that successful, because you already had the first movie out and people wanted to see it out of curiosity because people was the controversy around it. Without no controversy around the second film, unless they do it, I don't know if it will get it to $1 billion. I do see it getting in excess of like 650, and that would be an amazing feat, especially for such a small budget. But I'll say 650 to 750. I don't see it hitting 8. That being said, that's still successful, especially if you want to go in ratio to budget. Now, I do feel that they may consider using this to backdoor a brand new DCEU for a very far down the line future, like 5 to 10 years from now, after they're done milking this universe that Zack Snyder had built. The Batman also provides something that we were not able to get in Zack Snyder's, in the Zack Snyderverse, if you will, that David Ayer wasn't able to flesh out. Gotham living and breathing like a character onto herself. So now you kind of set the tone for Gotham. So now you could get a pretty honest idea of the rollout of how these guys will look. You know, they're bad guys, their rendition of bad guy. In this grounded, very grounded, but darker, R-rated-esque setting, even though they didn't get an R rating on it. I think here we could flesh these characters out on a more character-driven angle. Something that I'm not going to say Zack Snyder's not capable of doing, because he can do it and has. But he favors look and spectacle just as much as the storytelling. That this one, where we can get most of everything we need in shot, in camera, it forces Matt Reeves to be more reliant on his in-camera storytelling, as opposed to saying that I can take care of that in post. Not saying that Zach does it like that, but he's so visual. You can tell that he'll get the bones that he needs, but he'll make it work. He's good at what he does. They do the, and I do like that they favor each other, because they both like darker stories, darker plots. And then I feel like these guys that are so much more like each other than they are not. Zack Snyder and Matt Reeves. I think this is a film that everybody, even from the Snyder fandom, should watch. There's nothing. This is not a trash movie. And I hate when people overly use the sentiments of trash. But this is more in line with focusing on Batman and the world that he lives in, and detailing it out to get us to that point. This movie is a success already, so it doesn't need me to say it will be successful. Question is will it make $1 billion? I don't think it'll be that successful, though it still has a fighting chance too. I think this film may cash out in the 800s, petering into the early 9s. If it can get over 950, a re-release to the theater will make that movie $1 billion. A shot and a swoosh. We'll drop the bucket on that one. But let's say this movie ends in the 7s. That really wouldn't surprise me so much. Because even though I like it, I don't see the general audience talking about the Batman to the degree that fandoms would. Or at least a degree that would make you think this would be $1 billion franchise. But that being said, man, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let me know if you agree or disagree. Let me know if you feel the same feelings and sentiments. Your boy finally seen it, and I was I wouldn't even say pleasantly surprised. It made me, I really enjoyed this movie. I really enjoyed it. I'll give you the details on that soon. We'll break it down, but I have to be fair on my position, my assertions, but most importantly, what goes on in the fandom. And I don't think that the Batman is something that the Snyder Cut fandom should be as expressed intimidated, if you will, that this may have an adverse effect towards the Snyderverse coming back to fruition. There's a possibility that it could if you could flex from this to this, but when in post-pandemic, when we have a need for content, just business-wise, artistically, you will want to start it, and we even try to find creative ways to make it work. But realistically, you would have to, by way of business, continue with Aquaman 2. You need to focus on what you guys already started, because going back and redressing it and trying to refix it has not worked in DC's favor. They would need to continue while backdoor fixing out how to adjust it so that if we wanted to put this together as a collection, they all would seemingly fit in the same world. And I think that's why they're pushing back Aquaman 2. They've pushed back Flash. I really do believe this has a lot more to do with continuity. Zack Snyder and the Snyderverse as the Snyder fandom, defines it. That being said, leave it in the comments below and let me know how you feel about it. Let me know if you've seen the Batman. I finally seen it. It was so much about time. There was so much I could really want to get to discuss it with you guys, and we're going to get to it. But for now, man, go see the film. If you're a boycott WB fan, hey, look, I'm not going to force you to do nothing because I can't. But I suggest you give it a shot if you love comic book movies. At the end of the day, that's what we came here to do. I'm not here to tell you that you should support anything that WB is doing against or at an affront or aside to Zack Snyder. But at the same time, you have other story makers just like Zack Snyder that want to tell a story. Let them tell theirs. That's just how I feel. Let me know how you guys feel in the comments below. You already know what it is. Like, share, subscribe. See you next time. And as always, till I have a better outro. Chill.